What Mercedes just found is shocking. So we're going to be going through that and 3 other stories in today's video. So make sure to like this video, and if you want more Mercedes news content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting that red button down below. The first story is unexpected engine cooling cost Mercedes 0.5 seconds a lap in Bahrain GP. Mercedes Formula One boss Toto Wolff says the unexpected need to cool the engine on both its cars during the Bahrain Grand Prix cost the drivers 0.5 seconds a lap. George Russell started third, but capitalized on Charles Leclerc, encountering bracket trouble to heat a kiwi of cars behind leader Max Verstappen in the opening stages. However, Russell was later told to not use his overtake mode and was overtaken by both Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari cars to drop to 5th at the end. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton struggled to make progress from 9th on the grid and came home 7th, having also been warned that he needed to cool his powertrain. With Mercedes having fronted a 1 and 2 in the second practice session before Russell qualified 3rd, Wolff reveals that concerns on the engine side hampered its potential. For us, testing was pretty good, and the performances on Thursday and Friday were encouraging, Wolff said. The car was stable and good, and the drivers liked it. Start went fine, and then unfortunately, we had to start cooling the engine more than we expected. We don't understand yet where that came from. That was unexpected, and then from then on, when you have to switch 0.3 to 0.4 seconds of power unit performance off and have to lift and coast, it was altogether 0.5 to 0.6 seconds that we couldn't take from what their car had in it, and therefore, it wasn't great fun. Despite hopes that the field had closed on Red Bull after a tight qualifying hour, Max Verstappen cruised to victory with a winning margin of 22s over his teammate. Wolff concedes that Verstappen is not in a different league, but he's in a different galaxy, and described the Dutchman's relentless performance as extraordinary. Everybody else, we saw the differences between the Ferraris and the Group Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes. We are probably in a similar ballpark, and we just need to look at ourselves, get on top of our problems, and if we are able to manage our race weekend better, we will be racing those guys, he added. Asked whether Verstappen appeared uncatchable compared to last term, Wolff replied, "Unfortunately, yes. Just have to acknowledge his performance levels are really strong." However, Wolff admits that he retains hope that Mercedes can chase down Red Bull this season, citing Sergio Perez's deficit to Verstappen as a positive for Red Bull's rivals. In qualifying, we were pretty close together. That was good, and I believe our performance was masked by our problems, he said. Perez is 20 seconds behind his teammate, so we have hope. That is maybe the silver lining I can see, but it is very thin and far away, and I almost can't see that far. Hamilton encountered a rough start to the season during the Bahrain Grand Prix, which saw him maneuver through a series of obstacles that put to test both his expertise and the capabilities of the W15 F1 car. On lap 17, the 7-time world champion faced a momentary performance dip due to an issue with energy recovery. The problem was later attributed to a depleting battery that was recharged in the following lap. Adding to his challenges, Hamilton reported a broken seat on lap 25, further complicating his troubles. Despite remaining positive after the race, Hamilton spoke of a tough Grand Prix and pointed out a high degradation with the car. Considering the issues Hamilton faced, Schiff gave her verdict from the season's first race by stating that Mercedes, which is currently in the learning phase, has a lot of work to do on the car to catch up with Red Bull. She said on Sky Sports F1. There was a lot that they were dealing with. They seemed optimistic, at least Lewis did. This is now the bitter reality. We've seen the car's performance in qualifying and seen the performance in the race. While I think they have made a step forward because the drivers have told us that the grip is tighter, but if you look at the performance of the Red Bulls, Mercedes are still quite a while away. It means they will still have to work at this concept. They've only had this concept for a couple of weeks on track, while some teams in this paddock have had this concept for 2 years. They are still in the learning phase of how to really lock in the performance. The second story is Russell insists there's potential in the Mercedes car after being hindered by big red alarms in Bahrain. George Russell was hindered by big red alarms as the Mercedes man had to settle for P5 in Bahrain. A brilliant getaway from third on the grid saw Russell overtake Charles Leclerc on the second lap, the Ferrari man unable to stay in touch with his Mercedes rival. But from that promising start, things soon unraveled for Russell as overheating issues forced him to lift and coast, costing him not just lap time but race positions too. Sergio Perez was the first to make his way past the Mercedes, Carlos Sainz soon followed, and later Leclerc managed to fight back past his rival, leaving Russell fifth at the flag and under pressure from the McLaren of Lando Norris behind. "I made a good move on Charles Leclerc and I thought, here we go," said Russell. "As soon as I got into second, I had all these big red alarms come up on my steering wheel. The engine was overheating, and turns out we got the cooling wrong on the engine. We had to turn the power down. It was costing us half a second a lap. We don't quite understand how we got it wrong, because we've not experienced that yet, especially so early in the race. Then it was impossible to defend. So that was a real shame. The podium may have just been out of reach, but as I said, it had a huge knock-on effect, and from there, we just went backwards." With Lewis Hamilton also struggling with reliability issues further down the order, it was a chastening night for Mercedes, who had gone into the race with high hopes, following their strong showing in the evening conditions in FP2. There, they had exhibited both good one-lap pace and decent race simulation pace, and with conditions much cooler here than normal, overheating was not even being talked about by anyone as a potentially limiting factor come race day. The track temperature was hovering around 25 C, for much of the Grand Prix, much lower than the highs of 35 C the drivers were faced with in practice. And yet, it was overheating that proved to be Mercedes' downfall. "We could have easily put bigger bodywork on, and our problem would have been resolved," continued Russell. "But we need to understand what made us choose that bodywork and why the cooling was so much of a limitation. Maybe there was something slightly wrong with our forecast or with the simulations. Obviously, the conditions had changed, the wind had changed. Maybe that had an impact. Nevertheless, that was a shame. There is potential in the car, but today, we definitely didn't show it." Saudi Arabia next weekend will be a completely different prospect though, with temperatures there likely to be much hotter than in Bahrain. Mercedes only have a few days to fully understand what went wrong here, and to make sure they get it right next weekend to unlock that potential that Russell was keen to insist exists in the W15. Toto Wolff described Max Verstappen as in a different galaxy after the Dutchman cruised to victory in the opening race of the season. Verstappen picked up where he left off as he comfortably won the opening race of the 2024 campaign, a result that is likely to be repeated throughout the year. Toto Wolff says, "Mistakes behind Mercedes' issues. Mercedes did not have such an easy evening with both drivers having to manage power unit issues, but after the race, team boss Wolff was perplexed as to why they lost so much time on the hard tire. Max was in a different galaxy," Wolff told reporters, including PlanetF1.com, in Bahrain. "We need to look at ourselves, why we lost so much performance on the hard tire. We got the cooling level wrong, and therefore you need to lift and coast, you lose performance on the tires. It was a bit of a vicious circle." As for that issue, Wolff was asked whether it was circuit-specific, and he said they were learning from the many mistakes they made. "I think it's weird because we had some pace in the car, but we didn't on the hard tire today," Wolff said. "I think there's many mistakes we've done, but in the end, we're learning. We have a brand new car and we're seeing the glimpses of performance but couldn't materialize any of that today, so I'm really keen to look at the data and see what we can do." On George Russell's battle with Charles Leclerc, Wolff said that ultimate defeat was due to them giving both drivers a car that was not competitive. "There's some oddities," he said. "He was really strong coming in, but we gave them both a car that today was not competitive enough for the race. And I think we know a few things why, but obviously the two of them struggled during the race. You can see that." The third story is Toto Wolff explains steps he wants F1 authorities to take over Christian Horner controversy. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff has urged Formula One and its governing body to set the compass right amid continued controversy surrounding Christian Horner. Horner was earlier this week cleared to continue as Red Bull team principal following an internal probe into inappropriate behavior towards a female colleague. But the 50-year-old faced subsequent scrutiny after a series of leaked WhatsApp messages appearing to be exchanged between him and his complainant were leaked to all the major players in the sport. FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem told the Financial Times on Friday that the turmoil is damaging the sport on a human level. F1 Chief Executive Stefano Domenicali has not commented on the matter. Earlier this week, Wolff called for greater transparency from Red Bull Racing's parent company, Red Bull GmbH, who conducted the investigation. The Austrian corporation said it was confident the inquiry into Horner had been fair, rigorous, and impartial, and added that the report, understood to stretch to 150 pages, is confidential. Horner has always denied the claims. "Let's see where it goes in the next days," said Wolff on Saturday night. "I would very much hope that the governing body, the sanctioning body, and the commercial rights holder sets the compass right. But the moment I start to continue to question how this has been handled, I am probably not doing any good to the whole issue, because then it could be seen as this just being about a power fight within F1. That's why I think it's not in the team's hands."